Excellent. All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a talk on building more secure applications, harnessing the power of OWASP's Security Knowledge Framework, Application Security Verification Standard on Kubernetes. So lots of different things we're going to talk about. Two of them are from OWASP. Kubernetes obviously is not from OWASP. This presentation is prepared by myself and my colleague Kurt, who unfortunately can't be with us today. And I want to give him full credit for a lot of the heavy lifting that he's done to get this working. And so unfortunate that he can't be here. A little bit about me. My name is FarshadAbasi. I've been building application software and systems since 25 was actually probably longer than that. Half of my time was spent as a software developer. So I built software professionally for large and small companies, Intel, Motorola, all kinds of different brand names you may be familiar with or not. But then after building software, a lot of my software got hacked and I learned a lot of hard lessons. So I decided to shift on the other side and help software developers make software that hopefully doesn't get hacked. So that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years. I spent a decade as a senior member of HSBC Bank's IT security team. I was fortunate enough to be a part of their movement in building an application security team in the late 2000s. We built an AppSec-focused team that worked with software developers to build more secure software. And then as the world went from waterfall to agile to DevOps, we got to adopt and learn how to do those things at the forefront of it, all of that. So I'm quite grateful for the experiences that I learned, and I'm out there descending in person. I'm a CISSP, AWS professional, Azure engineer, all that kind of stuff, so I won't bore you with it. Let's just do a quick poll. I know it's in the afternoon and this is the last talk, so you're all probably tired and everything else, but let's just find out how many people are developers and building stuff. Data. It's a set of about 283 requirements for building secure applications. And then you, underneath it all, SKF uses Kubernetes and Docker as the infrastructure and as the foundation. And SKF itself is an application. It's just a web application that uses Kubernetes and Docker containers to orchestrate labs. And it uses ASVS as the foundational knowledge material. So we're going to look at a bunch of all that kind of stuff. And so SKF is composed of labs, code examples, knowledge-based training, and all the good stuff. So what you will take away by the end of the presentation is understanding why and how to use SKF and ASVS. Why would you want to do all this stuff? The tools to get SKF up and running. So that was the challenge we solved, and that's what I'm presenting on, because we tried to get it up and running for ourselves and for our clients, and we ran into a lot of problems. So we decided to roll up our sleeves and make it work. And then we've made the source code available, so all of you can take this after the event and go and stand up your own security knowledge framework stack and on top of Kubernetes. And the audience, oh yeah, and one more thing. So you'll take away tools for getting SKF up and running on Kubernetes and getting the most out of ASVS and SKF to build more secure applications, because either you're developers, as a few of you mentioned, or you're helping developers, hopefully. So this could be a great tool to build more secure applications. And the audience is security practitioners that are helping developers roll out training programs or supporting them in some shape or form, software developers who need to write more secure software themselves today, and IT and ops folks who are interested in Kubernetes and deploying the security knowledge framework. Why and how to use ASVS and SKF. And we'll do a bunch of demos and things like that as well. So first of all, a lot of people come to me and say, hey, Farshad, we're looking for a coding standard. And they're like, hey, we were told that OWASP can be used as a and implemented in your system again. And so it provides them with a list of developers with a list of requirements for secure development, not necessarily a coding standard. You can use that as a metric for your app security. So if you're an application owner and you want to have a certain level of assurance, ASVS groups the requirements into 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and 1 is like, actually, in fact, the government of Canada, they published a baseline for level 1 controls. That's the minimum. And then level 2 is for applications that have a bit more sensitive data. They may have a little bit of a higher assurance requirement. And level 3 is for applications that have medical data, processing large financial transactions and things like that. So then you can categorize your applications and use that as a metric to figure out, how sensitive your application is and that kind of thing. You can also, of course, use it as a guidance for secure development, as we mentioned earlier. And you can use it during procurement of application security, right? If you're going to go buy a pen test, which I hate the word because pen testing is not the only thing you should do for your application. In fact, OWASP's web security testing guide says that pen testing is not effective for applications, and it's going to give you about a few of your actual issues. If you really want to test an application, you got to do a design review, you got to do threat modeling, you got to do code review, and pen testing. But the problem with pen testing is that pen testing requires you to have known vulnerabilities and then chain them and penetrate the system. While if you just wrote brand new code, there is no CVE, there's no known vulnerability for that brand new code. So pen testing an application is akin to research and not super effective. But you can use the ASVS as a way to measure different pen test providers, right? So you can say, hey, you're a pen test provider and you're a test provider, and are you using ASVS? If they're not, then it's going to be hard to compare them. So it's a great way to force your provider to be consistent and use it. And you can see the categories of ASVS here. It's got 14 categories. Category 1 focuses on architecture, design, and threat modeling. The other categories are technical controls and things you would build into your application. And I'll spare you to go and have a look at them in depth, and hopefully you'll adopt them. But here's an example. This is category 7.1, which focuses on law content. And so they show you, for if your application, if you've determined that your application only requires assurance at level 1, then those are the 2 controls that you so verify that XYZ happens, but developers can simply take that and say, well, if I'm going to get tested on that, I better build that control into my application. It's akin to test-driven design for those of you who are familiar with that TDD. So it has all these features. It has projects, it has code examples, it has checklists, it has C. So first of all, you can go to the Security Knowledge Framework webpage. It's on the OWASP.org site. And they've got a link here to do an online demo, so I'll just skip. All right. The internet is slow. My apologies on behalf of the internet connection, and we can continue on. Oh, what's going on here? Connection failed. Oh, the the internet connection that I'm connected to is not letting this go through, which is not good because I was going to show you a bunch of cool things. So Keycloak. All right, well, we'll just skip it and I'll just talk about it. That's fine. So yeah, the project section allows you to, and definitely go play with it yourself and take a look. The project section allows you to take ASVS and create groups of requirements that matter to you, right? The ASVS, the regular one has 283 controls. The web one also has quite a few controls. So what you can do is you can go through those controls, create a project, and then put in the subset that applies to you, and then manage it. I'm not a fan of that project section because it's trying to mimic what Jira does, and a lot of developers already have Jira or project management system, so that's not what I use it for mostly. Mostly, I would use it for code examples, the checklist, the knowledge base, and the labs. And what's really beautiful is because they use ASVS as a foundation, all these things are traceable. So you can start by making a checklist of the ASVS items that matter to you. And then for each of those, you can look at the knowledge base where it provides further explanations way beyond what ASVS provides. ASVS in the actual standard provides a really high level definition of what the requirement is, but in the knowledge base in SKF, they go deep into what it actually means, how you remediate it. And if you want to see some code examples, they've got examples in at least 4 common languages. I believe they have Java, .NET, Python, JavaScript, and you can also add your own. Oftentimes we get asked by clients that, hey, we're using language X and Y. Can you come and do some training customized to that, the language for our developers, so we can use this platform? And if it doesn't have those code examples for the ASVS items you want to train the developers on, you can simply add them in. That's the beauty of this open source framework. And then of course you can do training with learning journeys as well. So you can leverage the lab. For example, the Ingress API at the time when they built this was in beta, which has now moved on. So there's a lot of compatibility issues is what we resolved that we released. So I think I already asked who's using Kubernetes and Docker, so that the examples we've provided are AWS specific. We also have a Minikube example of that. If you want to run it locally, it's available in the GitHub repository that I'll put on this slide at the end. So you can see, well, actually here and the end. This is the address of our GitHub repo where we released our code. And yeah, we've got 2 different flavors of it. We got one that can be deployed locally with Minikube and Docker Compose on your machine. And there's one that you can use to deploy this on AWS with Kops and Terraform. And Kops are not to be confused with the police. Kops allows you to manage Kubernetes clusters, right? Those of you, which I think is a lot who've used Kubernetes know that Kubernetes is not easy to deal with, right? And just getting it working is hard. Everything about Kubernetes can be hard. Kops makes it easy to start, stop, create clusters, and manage all that kind of stuff. And we also leverage Terraform. So lessons that we learned was that using the SOO branch of SKF and SOO branch in SKF 4.0 and Docker images is what you got to do. Using Kops and Terraform in AWS, it was not easy, but we made it work. And we ended up using Let's Encrypt certificates and AWS integrations. These were the enhancements that we made. And we encourage you all to join the Security Knowledge Framework on the OWASP Slack channel. If you have questions or want to participate in the project or help in any way or get any information. So the current Security Knowledge Framework is maxed at version 1.2114, and the deployment templates have issues. So you need a lot of patience to get it to work, but we've made that simple so you can use our scripts to get it up and running pretty quickly. And I'll do a quick demo of that as well. So this is probably really small and you can't see, but there were a couple of pieces of code. This is where we had to fix. So, that was mostly around the Ingress API. So that, as I mentioned, the Ingress API for Kubernetes 1.21 was in beta, and since then has come out of beta, but because SKF itself hadn't updated certain parts of it, it would break. And so we've managed to address that and release that code. So I'm just going to show you a demo Yes, please.
Why Let's Encrypt not, if you're in AWS, why use Let's Encrypt and not ACM?
It was easy. This was easier for us, and we want to make this portable to the local version and others. So if we stick to that, it may not be as easy for portability. So here's so what we've rolled out is a shell script. So when you source that, it will create a whole bunch of other shell scripts, as you can see here, and those other shell scripts are very nicely numbered. So this is a multi-step process, and then as you can see here, once this is sourced and it runs, then you basically end up with shell scripts that are provided to you, and they're nicely numbered. So you first start with the ones that start with the number 0, and you run them, and that'll allow you to, like 010 defines the labs, then 020 it creates the labs, and then 030 it validates them, 040 creates the ingress routes, and then the 5th one gets it all up and running. And you'll see that here. I'm going to run it. So we start by using the definition one. And one other thing I'm going to mention is that security knowledge framework requires 2 Kubernetes clusters. Why does it do that? Because the labs have vulnerabilities in them, and the authors felt that it was not so secure if you have the command and control, or what they call the demo, the portal application, in the same place as where you have these vulnerable apps. So if someone, if a particular vulnerable app has a vulnerability and can break out of the container, say, which is very theoretical, could be difficult, technically they could access the command and control of security knowledge frameworks. For that reason, they've put them separately, but they are looking at re-architecting this. Right now, there's a lot of work going on. The project is kicked up again. And in fact, the other day, one of the project leads on LinkedIn was asking people to join and help with that. So we've decided to do that, and I encourage you that are interested to do that as well. So this is going to build the labs cluster first, and then it's the second set, which start with the normal cluster, and at the end we tie it all together. So you run the first script, and then that'll define your Kubernetes security knowledge framework labs, and then after that's done, I'm going to put it on double speed here so we can labs. So it'll go through the motions and it'll set everything up. So the first step defined it, then it created it, and then once the labs is created, then you run the third script. So here we go through the motions, and there we go, creating the tasks. Let's keep going. And then when you've done that, then you run the next script, which is the third one, which is the validate. So there's always a define, create, validate for both sides. And then you set up the CNAMEs and the routes. So right now you can see here the lab cluster is ready. So then we create the ingress routes. And for those of you who are not familiar with Kubernetes, the ingress API allows you to make the Kubernetes services available to outside, right? So in this case, our service is the labs, and we're going to use the ingress to set it up so that you can access it from the outside. In this case, the outside would be the Kubernetes command, or the security knowledge framework command and control. So here we go. So yeah, after creating it, then it'll go to the next step, which is there we go. So kube-control context is set to our lab environment, and then we run the final one here. There's a couple more. Let's go here. There we go. So this one gets the ingress for the labs. Sorry, I put it back on double speed. Now we're going to set up the demo, which is the actual security knowledge framework command and control. And then so the same similar steps, you define it, you create it, you validate it, set up the ingress, and at the end we tie it all together, and we'll have a demo environment. So this one is now creating that based on the definitions. And once that's created, we're going to validate. So now we have the demo clusters ready. So we're going to just basically set up the ingress for all of this, and then we basically copy at the end we just set up a CNAME for it, and then you can go to that URL and use your brand new created security knowledge framework cluster. So this last step where you apply it, what this does, the first few steps, they set up the Kubernetes clusters for you, But what the last step will do, the last step will actually deploy what's required. Things like MySQL is required and Flask and a bunch of stuff. This is for the actual application. So the first two steps, set up your infrastructure, and then once your infrastructure is set up, then you put in the moving parts, the code essentially of Security Knowledge Framework, and there it is, it's up and running, right? So, and I'll just, because we don't have the internet working on my laptop, we'll just show you the rest of the demo. I was hoping to actually play around with a couple lab examples, but we'll just rely on the pre-recorded video here. I reconnected it to this one, but the TLS issue is I'm having some TLS issues. It's streaming, I think. I'm hoping it's streaming. So here it is. So now the cluster is up and running, and ignore this. So we're going to copy and paste the URL of our brand new created Security Knowledge Framework cluster, SKF, and it's coming up, it's coming up. There it is. So this is the new splash screen of SKF. And they made it pretty fancy. So if you're a developer, you can jump into things that are helpful to you, the code examples, the knowledge base, and the security requirements. If you're a tester, they've got a bunch of things for you, like training and labs. Maybe you want to look at the knowledge base. They've just made it easy to jump to the different sections. But as you can see at the top, these are the key sections of Security Knowledge Framework, right? Your projects, your code examples, your checklists, your knowledge base, labs and training, as I mentioned. But these big colorful buttons just make it easier to go into the section that is more relevant to your function, because any of these different folks can be leveraging Security Knowledge Framework to do their job better. So let's look at the labs here. Particularly, we'll look at a lab that's related to LFI, or local file inclusion. And here we go. Okay. So yeah, we're going to go to the lab section, and then in the lab section, and then the other nice thing, as I mentioned, is there's a lot of traceability, right? So if you start with a checklist, which is what I recommend, it's got ASVS regular, the web one, it's got ASVS mobile, and you can go through them and then create your own checklist, or you can even add entries if there's something missing. You're like, hey, our environment is custom, we need to add a few things. You can add them in yourself as well. And the labs are all related back into those particular ASVS level. And they've got the different levels of difficulty as well listed here. And the knowledge base is also connected, and it's all traceable from that perspective. And if you want to know about a particular lab, they've got write-ups on what that vulnerability is about and how it works. It launches a big vulnerability, right? I'm sure many of you are familiar with things like WebGoat, which has been around forever, right? Jeff Williams created that years ago. You're familiar with probably Juice Shop. If you're not, I highly recommend it. It's a modern application with a REST API. It's written in Angular, Node, and Express. We use that quite a bit to train folks. But the challenge with them is that they don't really trace the ASVS. So if you've got a company that has adopted ASVS as their requirements and you've tested based on ASVS, what you want is you want to go through the parts, the weaknesses, right? You want to say, well, our developers failed on these particular ASVS items, so you want to take those and deliver custom training. Those other things like WebGoat or Juice Shop, they're just implementing general OWASP top 10. Right? They've got a bunch of OWASP top 10. This presenter was Brian was speaking about. You should be able to say, well, these particular ASVS numbers failed. Can I go and teach them? So then here's the relevant labs that are directly related. So in this particular case, let's say your developers, they're not implementing things related to local file inclusion or path traversal property. So then there's a lab where they can learn about it. So then once the container is launched, a URL is provided that you can go to. And there we go. So there's our lab. So basically, so unfortunately, I can't interact with this because again, the internet is not working on this laptop. But this is just a basic example of a drop-down menu, right? So you can, when you create the drop-down menu, you can either specify the specific value, right, in the drop-down list, or you can just use the display text. So in this case, if you actually inspect this, the developer just used the display text. They didn't specify an actual value. So you, as a tester, you can go in and put a value and see what happens, right? So normally what this will happen is, like in this example application, you can select a chapter in a book. You can select intro, chapter 1, chapter 2, and depending on what you select, it goes to the back end and grabs a file for the intro or for chapter 1 or chapter 2, and it displays it to the user. Except that the person that developed this are just using the display text as the value to go and fetch that file. They're not explicitly specifying a value, they're not specifying a value for that item. So you can go in and change that. So here we go, I'm gonna show you. So you can go and add that in and then add in a path of your choosing and see what you can get. So in this case, we're gonna go and try to grab the classic passwd file and grab people's passwords. So here you can see that that as I was mentioning, that there's no value explicitly provided, or actually they've got text/intro.txt, right? It's funny because in the live version that's currently on the SKF site, it doesn't have a value, so this must have been a different version that we used previously for this video. But yeah, so here you can see that there's this file. So as a tester, I'm curious, like what else can I do with this? So what I'm going to do is try to put a different path. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to try to go ... and then etc. passwd, and see if it'll go and fetch that for me. And then, once I've done that, there's the drop down. I select it, and there it is, right? It grabbed the password file because this web application wasn't built properly. So this is how you can demonstrate to your developers, and they can go and learn about these topics very easily. And there's a write-up for each of these as well. So once they've done the lab, as I was showing in the earlier slide, that there's additional reading or material or code example. The particular use case is that you have a company, Acme Corp. They have 3 developers, and they're growing to be 10 people by the end of the year. And the development team knows that it's important to be secure, right? But they're all looking at each other, and they want to build security requirements into their app. And then they come and they say, hey, we want a coding standard, right? And so it's like, well, okay, well, there's no coding standard, but the security knowledge framework can be used as a platform to achieve your goals, right? So Acme Corp, who's got 3 developers and doesn't have a lot of money, can go and implement this for free, and then get their 3 developers to start using SKF and checklists that they've created, or the requirements that they think are applicable to them. Go and learn about it. Go and read up on what each of those ASVS items mean. Now, if they just go and take the ASVS standard on its own, the ASVS look at each other and we're like, well, we don't quite understand this ASVS because there's not enough definition. But the security knowledge framework elaborates on it, gives you a lot more information so that it makes it easier to really figure out what is that requirement about. And so this Acme Corp team, they can do that. They can do it. First of all, what they should do is they should do a scoping exercise where they go through all 283 controls and figure out which ones fit their application. They might be making an application that doesn't have a front end. It's just categories of the SIs and figured out what applies to them. That subset is what they would adopt. And it fell on me and 2 of my teammates. And it was a daunting task to try to create an application off the bank, and it's probably no one's maintaining it, right? Using a standard like this, it's crowdsourced, it's open source, they're maintaining it all the time. There's some really smart people contributing to the standard, including our team. We've contributed dozens and dozens of additions and corrections to the standard to make it better for everyone. So this team can adopt it and then use SKF, not only to manage their requirements, but also to train their developers and make them more successful. You can also add your own modules and add your own labs. So I'll just show you a quick demo on that, and then let's go here. So a bunch of you mentioned you've heard of Juice Shop, right? So what you can do, and Juice Shop is containerized, so you can just plug that into SKF so that your team members can just simply, let's just do an example of that, right? So you've added, let's say you've got the Juice Shop container, you reconfigured Kubernetes to give you Juice Shop. Let me just move this out of the way, whoops. there, Juice Shop will be available to them as a lab. And then they can just go and look for it or scroll down and find it. But it's the same manner that you would launch it, right? So there comes your container that you've made. And in fact, we've add things that are not present or add more difficult examples, more advanced examples. But in this case, we've added Juice Shop as a container here, and there it is. It launched Juice Shop very easily. So, again, it becomes your centralized training platform for that, rather than telling your developers, go to Juice Shop and say, hey, it's all in SKF. And then you can also use the training feature to create a training path, which you can investigate. So in this case, there's our Juice Shop instance. It's up and running. It gives you the IP address of where you can access it. And then, of course, it takes a bit of time for the container to come up. And then after it's up, there it is. Juice Shop is ready to go. So then you can go and play with it. In this case, let's take a quick look at a basic example where you go to this particular exercise, and your goal is to find a particular hidden information in the legal MD. So you go and open that up, and then it shows you that it's going to an FTP. It's coming from an FTP path. You'll see in a second. And then if I go to that path, I see, okay, let me see if I can get this out of the way. Sorry about that. That you can explore. So here it is. You just remove that legal MD, go to their FTP folder, and there's a whole bunch of other goodies that you can grab. So let's go back to the slides here. So you can learn with SKF. You can train. Pen testers can use it. It's quite a great platform. So what are some of the takeaway considerations? Some of the takeaway considerations are that you can use it as requirements, as I mentioned before, and you can use it for all the things, of course, but it can help you get more out of ASVS. You can use it as part of your AppSec training platform. You can harness it for more secure development lifecycle, or SDLC. You can customize the code examples, checklists, and knowledge base. You can add your own requirements in there. You can add your own code examples if you're using a language that is not there. We've had clients that have asked us, hey, I'm using Go or I'm using Ruby or whatever. Can you do that? We can, we have the expertise. We can simply go in and take some code and add it to the particular examples for those. And ideally, if you do that, release it back to the project so others can benefit from it as well. That'd be a good thing. And you can set up customized training based on areas of weakness, right? I really emphasize that because if you just provide general training to the developers, a lot of companies do the basic OWASP top 10 type of training. It is useful, and I 100% recommend that you do that. But getting training that's focused on areas of weakness is way more effective. A lot of platforms that are out there, say commercial scanning platforms, they'll scan your application and they highlight weaknesses, and then they also say, well, your developers failed on XYZ. Here, click on this particular link to go get some training related to that, right? So this is the free version of that. I mean, it doesn't tie into your automated testing, of course, but you can do that yourself. You can say which ASVS controls are we failing on often, and you can even trace it. I believe again, Brian was mentioning using your SIM and all those kinds of results, or you're looking at your security operations results every year, and then trying to figure out what have we been failing on, what kind of threats have been So yeah, feel free to contact myself and my colleague Kurt, available to get this up and running on GitHub. And
We're running containers like more ECS.
Okay.
And this is running, you're using AWS, EKS?
This is not using the AWS AKS service. So what this is going to do is set up a machine and then deploy all the stuff in there. So it's not using the Kubernetes service per se. It's using kops. So I can use an EC2 instance. So it's just deploying infrastructure, ECS, as you said. They also have the EKS, which is the full-blown Kubernetes. It's not leveraging those services. It can. It'll go into an EC2 instance, yeah, because we also launch it on a VM locally. So yeah, you can use also, if you don't want to use AWS, we've also made, let me just go back to the webpage. I preloaded it luckily before this internet connection issue. But if you go to our, there it is. We've got both the Minikube build for Ubuntu. So if you don't want to put it on AWS, that's an option. So you can just run a small instance of Minikube. It's nice and portable, and just run it on Ubuntu on your machine locally. And there's the instructions on how to do that. And if you want to build it out in AWS and do the full build, which is the demo that I was showing, which I recommend you do, then you just go with this. You just have to make sure that the user that you're using has the permissions to be able to roll out all the services that are required in all the instances. Any other questions? Who's going to run home and start using this? I hope all of you, right? Yes? Awesome. It's a great project. Like I'm quite grateful for the people that started this. They've done a lot of really good work. It needs more work, but we're hoping that we can all help and make it better, and the whole community can benefit from it as a result. Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this presentation, as well as B-Sides, and thanks again.